Hello and welcome back to another Keysight 2 devlog. In this one, I'm going to be talking about the undo-redo queue system of Keysight 2. I promise I'll try and make this interesting, but the too long didn't watch version is that in Keysight 1, the undo system had a history of just 20 steps, and it would lag every time you triggered it. In Keysight 2, I can have just a much bigger queue length, like thousands if I wanted to, and it shouldn't cause any kind of performance hitching or issues whatsoever. Right, so let's have a look over at Keysight 1 and see how Keysight 1 does things. Fun fact, by the way, there wasn't an undo queue in Keysight 1 until about 6 months after launch. This came in update version 1.2. This is my streaming setup. This has like 60 plus presets, right? And you'll see if we start getting some notes spawning, if I change to this and then change back to the previous preset via the undo system, you'll see that it hitches in a way that it doesn't hitch nearly as badly when I just change between the two. You know, if I now press undo, it hitches. This is because at the time of setting up the undo queue in Keysight 1, I had just no idea what I was doing, and I was looking for the easiest way of implementing this that I could. I'm going to have to switch over to drawing some stuff to explain this. So an undo queue could be just thought of as a series of states, you know, like a queue of them, that you want to move backwards and forwards through whenever you press the undo and redo buttons. And then these states need to become the live state, you know, depending on which one you're in. Now, the state of Keysight as a whole is quite a complicated thing. You know, we have all sorts of stuff. We have a bunch of presets. You know, we have system settings like randomizer, hotkeys, graphics, you know, all of this stuff. And yeah, the way that Keysight 1's undo system works is that it just grabs all of this and just caches it, you know, as one big chunk. Each of these undo queue states contains everything that is happening in Keysight. I don't actually understand how Keysight 1 is okay saving a copy of itself every time you click a button. So, you know, good job, Unreal Engine, I guess. But it does still cause a bit of a hitch when it moves between those states, especially because whenever you make a state the new live state, this needs to update the menu display as well. And updating the menu is a significant performance, you know, hit. So how do we do this better? I mean, I feel like at least one of the answers is really obvious to anyone, and you've probably been thinking this since I said caches the entire state all at once. What if we just cache the change? Like if your state is this big and you're just touching one tiny little part up here, why don't we just cache this bit and not worry about the rest? And that's, you know, that's exactly what we're going to do. Thanks to the command line system in Keysight 2, and for more information on that, see the previous video, it's now really easy within Keysight 2's architecture to grab, you know, a modification to some small part of data as just a string, like, you know, I'm just making something up, but like modifying this data ends up looking like this. So I can just save these as their own undo system elements, right? Instead of having to grab the entire thing. However, it isn't quite as simple as remembering all of the commands that have happened and then just executing them backwards. If we set a value to 1 and it was previously 0, we can't just cache the fact that this went from 1 to 0. We need to know a forward and a backwards direction. So just to explain this much better, right? Each undo thing is now broken into 2 sections. We have the action, sort of that I think about it, the action forwards, the thing that is being done, and then we have the action to undo. So let's say we have an action where we take a value from, you know, 0 to 1, right? In terms of the forwards and backwards actions, that means that our forwards action is saved as just value to 1, and then our backwards action is value to 0. And then when we go through the undo queue, let's just draw some things. So when we go through this undo queue, if we start here, this is where we are now. First, what we do is we go from, because we just did this blue action. This is what we just did, right? So we go inside this state here. And then if we undo again, we go to that one, and then to this one, and then back, right? But if we then redo, instead of, like we don't do this. What we do is we go from inside this state to there. And then if we redo again, then we go to here and then to there and then back. And then we're back at the current one. So each undo queue element in Keysight 2 is made up of a forwards and a backwards action. However, even though almost everything in Keysight in fact, everything in Keysight 2 is done via the command line interface, you can't just cache commands. Even though Keysight 2 is in its infancy and there's very little data to be editing, there's already plenty of situations where editing one thing will alter the state of other things unrelated to the thing that you actually edited. So if I change this main tab at the top from system to preset, we've toggled the state of this tab, but we also toggled the state over here, and therefore to undo the action, we can't just cache the action relating to this tab because we have some unknown thing that was happening elsewhere as well. In order to undo and redo this action, we therefore need to basically remember the state of all of these tabs, because clicking any button affects the state of all of these tabs. In order to use a command-based system for undoing the move between these two tabs, I would have to have a command being fired for every single tab to make sure that it's in the correct state. And that starts to get cumbersome. I mean, there's only 9 tabs here, but let's say you have a preset and you delete it, and then you press undo to restore the preset. If I were to do that via just commands, then I would have to trigger thousands of commands to rebuild a preset from the ground up. That would definitely cause a hitch, so we can't do that. So it isn't quite just as simple as caching command states backwards and forwards. In fact, before I explain how it actually works, you can see an example of it getting cumbersome via this new log. The next devlog will be on this log system, by the way. If I go deselect, select, I have currently implemented the undo for this deselect and reselect all as an array of commands. So if I press undo and then redo, you can see the amount of spam here, right? All of these undo events happened because it is restoring the state of every single one of these toggles with a separate command. So that's a lot of overhead. That's not good. I will be changing this. I just left it in for demonstration purposes. Oh, I forgot to mention, just to quickly go back to command-based undoing. Thanks to the magic of the command line, I don't need to update the entire menu every time you press the undo button. Because it's just executing a command, that command tells the necessary bits of UI to update. It means that if I do interaction sounds on and off, all that's happening is it's triggering the event to say, update the display of this stuff. None of the rest of the menu is being updated, which keeps things, efficient in a way that they weren't in Keysight 1. Right, but yeah. Going back to this spam, the way that therefore certain elements like the tab state up at the top, the way that those are cached into the undo queue is within a undo queue element in terms of caching a state. In Keysight 2, we don't just have, let me just draw some stuff. We don't just have a set of commands forwards and backwards. We also have optional lists of lots of other stuff, and these are arrays, but they have no entries in them. So for the state, we wouldn't be caching any commands, but we would be caching a state, like a menu state, backwards and forwards. And then this can be expanded later. We'll have things like theme, and preset and all sorts of like other arrays. But the nice thing is, this overarching undo element has a type, and that determines which of these arrays get filled out. And so if the type doesn't require a state, it just doesn't, you know, these lists have nothing in them, so they don't take up any space. This kind of undo typing means that the undo queue can be a lot longer because you are only saving the data you actually need. And thanks to only saving the data that you need, it means that we can have a really long undo queue, and it's really lightweight. So I've just clicked a ton of stuff, you know. Now I can just mash undo, and it's instant. And we've remembered everything. I haven't actually decided what the queue limit will be for the undo queue, but it's a case of, well, it might as well be a couple hundred or something crazy like that. Anyway, that about covers it. Thank you very much for sticking around to listen to my ramble about undo queues. I know that it's a thoroughly unsexy topic, but it's just one of those features where if you can't press Control-Z, like, that's bad. That's really bad. I can't believe Keysight didn't launch with it back in 2020. It's always a struggle with core software features where if they're implemented really well, nobody notices them. But if they're implemented badly or they're missing entirely, then everybody notices and it's bad. So this is definitely one of those really important things that I've been working hard to get right this time around. The next devlog will be, as I mentioned earlier, about this blog page. There's also, this is another really unsexy thing, but there's quite a lot to cover, and it's quite important moving forwards. I'd actually intended to cover this log in this video as well, but by the time I'd written the script just for what I wanted to talk about with the undo queue, I realized that the video would be like 20 minutes if I also talked about the log. So I'm leaving that to another devlog. Beyond the log stuff, there's probably going to be another couple of unsexy topics, you know, inputs and rebinding, stuff like that, before we start getting to the juicy stuff. But trust me, I really want to get juicy stuff as well. There's only so much like backend and UI and UX that I can handle before I want to go play with some particles. As ever, if you want to keep up to date on development or feedback or chat or get help with Keysight 1, join the Discord. It's linked in the description. Also, just to mention, I hate talking about this stuff, but if you like what I'm doing with the fixed price software, the free updates and direct support and all that stuff, if you want to give me extra money, there's also a buy me a coffee link in the description. While I obviously do make money from Keysight sales, it is not enough to live off of. So any extra support basically is just buying time to work on Keysight 2 more rather than have to go find, you know, extra contracts to not starve to death. Okay, shameless shilling complete. Have a fantastic and hopefully more exciting day than you've just had listening to me. See you in the next one. Bye.